This is Product of Newfoundland, a podcast about the strange truths and tall tales of a foggy island, Newfoundland, Canada. I'm Robert, and today I'm interested in a story of hot-headed soldiers, guns, nose-pulling, skeletons, and ghosts. It's the tale of Newfoundland's last deadly duel. Just about 200 years ago, on March 30th, 1826, in a clearing below Robinson's Hill in St. John's, Captain Mark Rudkin and Ensign John Philpott squared off, and at 15 paces they drew their pistols. They fired. Philpott fell to the ground. He was dead. It was the last death caused by dueling in Newfoundland. It all started with a party. Both Rudkin and Philpott were stationed in St. John's with the British Army and had been invited to a party hosted by Captain Willock of the Royal Newfoundland Companies. It was a pleasant evening for most, until the guests began to depart and things took a turn. Ensign Philpott thought it was too early to call it a night. He wanted to have a drink and maybe play a game of cards. The remaining guests, including Rudkin, reluctantly gathered around the table. When one of the gentlemen suggested they should not overstay their welcome and let their host go to bed, Philpott commanded, "There's the door, be off." "I can go home if I please, sir, without consulting you," the gentleman retorted. Philpott exploded, "Don't sir me, for if you do, I'll pull your nose and kick you out the door." As the men left, Philpott gestured to the door. "That nincompoop! I'd as soon shoot at him as not." The men were uneasy. Philpott was clearly in a terrible mood. But the card game resumed. At the end of the hand, Rudkin had won. Philpott's temper flared, and he accused Rudkin of cheating. "Damn you," yelled Philpott, "I would think very little of pulling your nose and kicking you out the window." Rudkin had enough and walked away from the table. Philpott followed, picking up a jug of water and throwing it at Rudkin. Not satisfied at soaking the man, Philpott rushed toward him and landed a solid kick. Willock, the owner of the home and host of the party, had to separate the man. And with that, the evening was over. The next morning, Willock urged Philpott to apologize to Rudkin. He reminded him that he'd called the man a cheater, drenched him, and kicked him. But Philpott would have none of it. As far as he was concerned, Rudkin deserved what he got. As far as Rudkin was concerned, the night before had been nothing less than an assault on his honor. For military men of the early 1800s, issues of honor were settled by dueling. It was a formalized ritual in which men took pistols, faced each other, then took a shot. In most cases, the shot was not intended to cause serious injury. It was a way to settle the score symbolically. So, with Philpott unwilling to apologize, Rudkin felt it was his duty to preserve his honor by challenging him to a duel. As was customary, Rudkin and Philpott chose their seconds. Seconds were friends who accompanied the duelists. Their job was to prepare the weapons, make sure the rules were followed, and, ideally, defuse the situation before any shots were fired. Philpott chose yacht captain George Maurice as his second. Rudkin selected Dr. James Strachan, a surgeon at Fort Townsend. The date was set as March 30th, 1826. Early in the afternoon, the men arrived at a small clearing at the base of Robinson's Hill. I think that's near modern-day Fieldian Grounds and Rennie's River. Maurice and Strachan counted off 15 paces and prepared 2 identical pistols. Philpott, who had removed his coat and shirt, took his position opposite Rudkin. With everyone in place, the duel was set to go. Strachan bellowed, "Ready! Fire!" The gunshots ricocheted from the surrounding hills. The bullet had come very close to Rudkin, but both men stood unharmed. This was the outcome most duelists wanted, a ceremonial face-saving gunshot followed by an apology. Everything was going to plan. The seconds reclaimed the pistols and waited for Philpott to issue his apology. But he was steadfast. Philpott had no intention of apologizing. There would need to be a second round. This wasn't what anybody expected. The pistols were uneasily returned to the participants. This time, Maurice called, "Fire!" The pistols went off, and Philpott fell to the ground. The 3 men rushed to his side. As they inspected his wound, Philpott gave one final breath. A pistol ball had torn through his chest, into his heart and lung. Rudkin had killed him. Rudkin was distraught. He went immediately to his commanding officer at Fort Townsend. He confessed what had happened. Shortly thereafter, he was charged with murder. The seconds, Captain Maurice and Dr. Strachan, were charged as accessories. Not quite 3 weeks later, the three men were in court. The first witness called was Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Burke, the commander at Fort Townsend Rudkin reported the killing to. Rudkin seemed out of his mind, said Burke. He recalled how Rudkin came into his room shouting about how Philpott had kicked him and that he had just shot him dead. The testimony pointed to Rudkin's biggest problem. He had to convince the jury that while they did fight the night before, the killing was not premeditated revenge. Rudkin took the stand in his own defense with a prepared address.
Here I plead before this tribunal, through whose decision I might, in a few hours, appear before the most high tribunal of my Creator. If this is so, I will do so knowing in my heart and soul that I had forgiven Philpott and entertained the same friendly disposition toward him that I felt from the first acquaintance.
While on the stand, Rudkin offered further insight into the affair. In his remarks, he chose not to focus on the allegation of cheating at cards, nor that Philpott threw a pitcher of water at him, but instead that Philpott had kicked him.
I blush to acknowledge that I suffered that vile indignity, aye, and in the presence of a gentleman. Of all the personal insults one man can give another, a kick is, gentlemen, the most galling and degrading. A blow is certainly a very gross provocation, but the man who strikes you treats you as if you were upon a level with himself in the scale of creation. But, gentlemen, in a kick, contempt is coupled with violence. It sinks you in your estimation, as it were, below humanity. It leaves a stain upon the character of the injured party, especially in military life, which verbal apologies never can efface.
Rudkin went on to explain how the stigma of being kicked could have followed him throughout his military career and beyond. Had he submitted to that kind of behavior, he said, he would forever have been branded a poltroon and coward. In his mind, this was a slight against him that necessitated a duel. In his defense, Rudkin had said that his first shot was directed to miss, but he didn't think that Philpott was approaching the duel with that intent. Before the second shot, he recalled, I saw him change his position and fix his eye upon me as if to make sure of his intended victim. Further to that, the fact that Philpott took off his shirt and jacket was proof, Rudkin thought, that he was expecting an injury. In Rudkin's estimation, Philip removed his coat so that no flannel would be carried into the pistol wound. When the evidence was all in, the Chief Justice told the jury they had to decide whether Rudkin was guilty of manslaughter or murder. Maurice, as Philpott's second, might be acquitted, the judge said, but Rudkin and Strachan, he reminded them, had admitted their role in Philpott's death. The jury deliberated for about an hour. When they returned, they offered a verdict of guilty without malice for all three defendants. The Chief Justice told them no such verdict was possible. If they believed there was no malice, then they had to return a verdict of manslaughter or offer an outright acquittal. The jury deliberated a further 20 minutes and decided to acquit all three men. And that, basically, is the end of the official story. But for me, it's not very satisfying. I think there are too many loose ends in there. The story, as I've related to you, is well documented in newspaper coverage at the time, most notably the Mercantile Journal of 1826. The quotes are taken from their coverage of the case. It's worth pointing out that, as Philpott was dead, his version of events is missing. There might be a whole other side to this story that we just don't know about, because he wasn't there to tell us. And though it's not mentioned in the Mercantile Journal's coverage of the court case, it's been widely suggested that the real source of friction between Philpott and Rudkin wasn't a card game. It was a woman. There was a competition between the two friends over a lady's hand, it says in the Encyclopedia of Newfoundland and Labrador. Rudkin's address does make mention of past altercations.
The insults offered me by the deceased on the night previous to the fatal meeting were not the first that I received from him, it is indeed but too true. However, I should not at all have alluded to the subject, but I am most anxious to efface from your minds any impression which such a report might have created.
Were those previous insults over a woman? Well, we don't know, but rumors persist. It's not entirely clear what became of Rudkin after the trial. Some reports indicate that he resigned his commission and devoted his life to maintaining Philpott's mother. Others maintain he became the caretaker of William Carson's farm in the St. John's area. While we can't be sure what became of Rudkin, the fate of the pistols used in that duel is clear. They wound up in the collection of the Right Honourable Sir William Whiteway, former Prime Minister of Newfoundland. Whiteway passed them along to his son, who eventually delivered them to Joseph Smallwood. Smallwood loaned them to the Newfoundland Military Museum. There's sort of a ghostly element to this story, too. While it certainly ventures outside the realm of verifiable fact, the story of Newfoundland's last fatal duel might not be completely over. Some folks say that from time to time, the events of March 30th, 1826 replay themselves near Robinson's Hill in St. John's. It's one of the city's more enduring ghost stories. The TV show Creepy Canada profiled the tale. You can check it out on the blog, productofnewfoundland.ca. Creepy Canada's version of the events doesn't completely jibe with my understanding of the facts, but I suppose they were mostly in it for the ghost stories, not the history. One final note. On June 19, 1880, during excavation of the Anglican Cathedral grounds in St. John's, a skeleton was discovered. It's believed to be that of Philpott. What happened to the skeleton after that is a mystery to me, but if you know, I'd love to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. So that's it, the story of Newfoundland's last fatal duel, complete with ghosts and skeletons. For more strange truths and tall tales of Newfoundland, check out the blog productofnewfoundland.ca. And if this kind of story is up your alley, please like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for listening. See you next time.